Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us for the National Center for Rural Road Safety's February webinar, Non-Traditional Funding for Rural and Tribal Transportation Agencies. My name is Jamie Sullivan, and I'm the Director of the National Center for Rural Road Safety. Just a few webinar logistics for you all. The duration of today's webinar is about an hour and a half long. Closed captioning is available. However, it has changed how you can get this now. So on your screen, you can see the icon in the top right corner of the PowerPoint for the captions. You'll find the closed caption button at the bottom of your screen, and you can toggle that on if you're interested in having those closed captions today.
Jamie,
A recording.
Yes. Slides aren't advancing.
Pull those back up real quick. So again, for anybody who's looking for those closed caption, while I'm doing that, on the bottom of your screen in the right-hand corner, there will be a toggle for those closed captions. Okay, is that better, Dana?
You're not in presenter mode yet.
But I am, so I'm not sure.
We're still seeing the title slide.
There we go.
Yes, okay. There we go. Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. The recording for today's webinar will be available on our website, as always, at ruralsafetycenter.org/webinar-archive, and that should be up within the week. Today, we will be utilizing our Q&A pod to ask questions for our presenters and also to alert Dana and I of any technical difficulties you may have. I will let you know that our very first speaker will not be able to remain with us for the entire webinar, so it's very important that if you have any questions for him during his presentation, that we do address those at the very first Q&A period. So please make sure you're putting those into the Q&A pod anytime while he's speaking so that we can address them after he's finished. Handouts are also available for download. You can find those in the top right-hand corner today. It looks like a paperclip, and you can go ahead there and download all of the presentations. Additionally, there will be feedback form at the end of today's webinar. We'd love to hear from you on additional topics that you'd like us to address in 2025, so please provide information there. And certificates of completion and the application for the CEUs through the university will be provided to everyone within a couple of weeks. So check your emails from those for those. They come out from our events@ruralsafetycenter.org email address. Today we're going to be talking about three different programs. We're going to start with the MATI program, Mobility, Accessibility, and Transportation Insecurity. Then we'll hear about the AARP Community Challenge. And lastly, we'll hear about the Rural and Tribal Technical Assistance Program. Our very first presenter for today is Kyle Shelton. Kyle is the director of the University of Minnesota Center for Transportation Studies. In this role, he oversees all center operations, research, education, and partnerships. Kyle has led research and policy work in transportation, urban development, and housing. He has a PhD in American Urban History from the University of Texas at Austin, and is the author of Power Moves, Transportation, Politics, and Development in Houston. His own research interests orbit around the intersections of the human, built, and natural environments. And I'm very excited to turn over today's presentation to Kyle to talk more about the MATI program.
Thank you, Jamie. I'll pull up my presentation here in just 1 second. You seeing that first page?
Yes, looks good.
Okay, perfect. Well, thank you again. I will apologize in advance. I may have a coughing fit at some point here as I'm going, but I'm really delighted to be with you today. Thanks to the Rural Road Safety Center for hosting us and letting us share about the Mobility, Access, and Transportation Insecurity program. As I'll explore more in a little in the slides ahead, this is the second round of this program. We have a live RFP right now, and it will be open until mid-April or late April. And I'll go through all those details in more time, but we are really excited to share it with the center's audience and with you all who are listening today, and are hoping that you can engage with it and share it with colleagues and share and that it presents a interesting opportunity for you. So I'll just jump in, and then I'm happy to do questions here at the end. So generally, starting with how we're thinking about this program and why we're thinking about this program and why the Federal Transit Administration put this topic together, is transportation insecurity. So basically, to kind of level set a little bit here, what we mean by that for this program is pretty broad, and it kind of depends on your community and what somebody's experiencing. But generally, it's being unable to reach a needed destination in a timely, safe, or comfortable manner. It might be missing or not taking trips because of lack of stable transportation. I know from many of my colleagues in Minnesota's rural areas, something like healthcare is really challenging to get transportation access to. That's transportation insecurity. Similar to a concept like food insecurity, where you might not know where your next meal is coming from. Lots of folks across the country lack certainty about how they'll move, and that's a huge disruption to their day. If you're thinking a lot about how you're going to get your kid to school, or how you're going to get yourself to work or another opportunity, it really can cause some other cascading stresses. And it can also just include sort of self-selecting to limit your opportunities or experiences, just saying, I don't think I can get there, so I'm just going to, opt out of this trip that I otherwise might take. So with that in mind, how does that feed into this MADI program? So the program is funded by the Federal Transit Administration, as I mentioned. It's administered by the University of Minnesota. I am the principal investigator. My colleague, Dr. Yingling Fan from the Humphrey School for Public Affairs, is our co-PI and leading the research program. We also have teammates from the Center for Neighborhood Technology and Tool Design who are helping us support the cohort members and the program as a whole. Right now, as I mentioned, we're in the midst of round one with 8 sites that were focused. Round one was focused on communities of more than 50,000 people, so larger urban areas. And this round two that I'm talking about with you today is focused on rural and smaller communities of fewer than 50,000 people. And I'll share a little bit more detail about that, but we're really excited to share this with you and to have this RFP open. The goal of the program, this is primarily a research and evaluation effort from the FTA's perspective, but the idea is to attempt to solicit community up ideas that address transportation insecurity. So it is not primarily a transit demonstration program, right? We don't have millions and millions of dollars to pay for a new service or a new, necessarily even maybe something like a big new vehicle or other things, but this is intended to say, we have this particular problem. We want to come up with a plan, and we want to do a demonstration that is, limited in time and scope, but still effective, that allows the University of Minnesota team to track that impact with our partners and to really understand how it impacts individual and collective lives in that effort. And part of our goal will be able to report back to the FTA and to stakeholders like yourselves and others to say, we've gone through this process. Here are all the sites that we did the demonstrations with. Here are the impacts we saw. So if you're thinking about something similar, or if you're experiencing a similar challenge, this might be a really great approach to it. Another important thing here is that this program and the interventions that we're looking to have people plan around are not limited to traditional transportation approaches or modes, and not even just to transportation alone. We're really looking for proposals and issues that tie what we all know as interconnected issues together. As I already mentioned, things like housing and health, access to opportunity and education are all really tied in to transportation and mobility. And so we are very much open to hearing from communities, from proposers, what is the set of challenge that you want to address. It could be that connection between transportation and housing. It could be transportation and health. We really want to make sure it's open to a broad swath of ideas. So just to dive into the round two a little bit, and again, I can answer questions about more of this at the end here. This whole program is broken into 2 phases. So this first phase, the RFP, which is open right now, we will be able to fund up to 3 applicants in rural and small communities to do $100,000 in support for the development of a plan, which will lay out the proposed demonstration, will identify sort of the groups of people in a community that they want to work with, and what the primary transportation insecurity issue is. This is about a year phase. The groups that are selected in this phase 1 will then submit their plan to consideration for phase 2, which is the full demonstration. And in this case, we have funding to support one of those 3 applicants for the full demonstration. And so out of those 3 who are selected in phase 1, they will submit a plan and a demonstration plan. One of those 3 will be selected to move into phase 2, and then they will be able to receive up to $600,000 over 2 years to launch the demonstration project and to work with us on the research and evaluation. And Jamie, thank you for dropping that link in the chat. I will show you the website as well at the end here. So again, just a different way to visualize this. I know there's a lot of, I confuse myself with round and phase sometimes, so I just wanted to show it one more time. What we have open right now are applicant coalitions submitting to our RFP. We will review them as the program team. We will select sites for phase 1, which is that up to 3 sites and up to $100,000. They will do a demonstration plan over the next year, submit it again, and a subset of those 3 sites will be selected for the phase 2. Most likely 1 site moving into that full demonstration. Just to give you a sense of our timeline for this round 2, we intend to select participants, the up to 3 participants for this first phase by the end of the spring of 2025. We will then execute contracts and begin the work, technical assistance support and planning work with them into phase 1. Again, that's about a year, summer 2025 to 2026. Then we'll have that second competition to fund a demonstration plan. That'll happen in summer of 26, and then whoever is selected into phase 2 would begin their deployed demonstration in the summer of 2026 and run it through summer of 2028. We have a lot of touch points. Again, Jamie already shared the website, and you can see the RFP release on that page, but this is what we're going to do between now and the final due date on April 30th. One of our goals was to make this a very simple and accessible program. It's a long time. There's 4 months, and I know many of you have applied for federal funds and other things that sometimes seem like they have a matter of days before the deadline is due. We really wanted to try to give people a lot of time to both learn about the program, ask questions, have conversations with partners, and express interest and get questions answered without it all being up against the full proposal due. So you can see a couple of those touch points here. By coincidence, I'm talking with you all this morning, and then we'll have another webinar this afternoon that will also be recorded and posted to the Maddie website. I'll also be holding weekly office hours through February and March. There is an expression of interest, which is basically a 1-page Google form that we ask people to fill out that will just allow us to confirm eligibility for this program, allow us to get a little bit of information about who's responding and what types of questions they have. And then we have a questions deadline. Everything will be posted to the website, including if you all ask great questions today, I might be jotting some of those down and making sure they get on the FAQs. And then our full proposal is due on April 30th, 2025. Again, it's a pretty straightforward proposal. Round 1's proposals were usually in the 6 to 10 page territory. It's not overly technical, and we are happy to answer questions about that as we go through. So just those details I already mentioned today. Here's a few other versions of that. So there is another webinar at 2 if you haven't gotten enough from me today and want to hear the whole thing. Then there's another one next week at 10 a.m. trying to jump around time zones and give options for folks. Those office hours and then the question submission line. Here is my contact and the contact of my colleague, Beth Andrews, who's our research administration manager and the program manager for Maddie. I'm also, Jamie already sent the email or the website. All of that information is available there. I will also say this QR code, and I'm going to leave this up for a few minutes, will also bring you to that same page. There's a listserv that you can sign up to, and you will get alerts if anything about the RFP changes, if we clarify something, if we address a question or make an edit. That's a great way to stay up to date with the program. And you can also just review the entire RFP itself on that page. I know these slides will be shared with you all as well. So I will actually move forward and answer any questions. I think that's my last slide. What I did want to just show you, the page that Jamie shared is our website. And it's fairly easy to navigate to. If you come down, you can see more about the first round that's ongoing. And then in this large yellow box is everything about our current round and request for proposals. Additional webinar videos will be posted here. We had an informational webinar in November. If you come into the RFP itself, you will see there's a PDF version of the RFP. There is more description. Again, a reminder, this is focused on rural and small communities. And then a HTML version which is translatable and accessible of all of the information. So I will pause there, and I'm delighted to answer questions. I'm going to stop my share.
Kyle, I'm actually going to have, can you put the share for your QR code back up?
Oh, I absolutely can. Yep.
Okay, so let's do that while we're taking some questions. Again, if you do have questions for Kyle, please put those in the Q&A pod, which you can find in the top right-hand corner of your screen. Kyle is not going to be able to remain with us for the rest of the webinar. As he mentioned, he does have another webinar to run to, so please put those in now so we can get them answered for you. So Kyle, we do have a couple that came in. The very first one is this Maddie funding project cycle recurring or a one-off?
At the moment, this is a one-off funding cycle. We've been really happy with the process and obviously continue to talk with our federal partners. But as the program is currently constructed, it is just a one set of funding for these 2 rounds.
And then the next one is there a match for this award?
That's a great question. There is not. There is no match requirement. Obviously, folks are welcome to include it if they have partners who want to do that or have a desire to augment what the Maddie funding is enabling them to do, but there is no match requirement in either phase. I don't intend there to be a match requirement. One thing that we may be looking for when we evaluate those moving into the phase 2 demonstration will be sort of a demonstration of commitment from the partners. It does not necessarily have to be a cash match, but if you think about, for example, if there's a partnership between a small rural community and a state DOT or a county service provider, we would want to be able to have sort of a certainty that all of those partners are on board before we go to a demonstration. So that's probably going to just be more like letters of support, a demonstration of in-kind hours, things like that. It does not have to be a cash match. So there's not ever a requirement, and that is not ever a evaluative part of the program as to whether or not people have match.
The next question is, could you give examples of what this funds? They're assuming it's not capital construction dollars with a year timeline.
Correct. Yep. So the phase 1, again, is really like, you can think of phase 1 and phase 2 of this as a smaller planning grant and then the larger demonstration in phase 2. So the smaller planning grant right now for the round 1 group that is going is supporting a range of things. It's staff time for the teams to enable them to devote the labor and devote the time to the development of a plan. It is the support of community engagement and listening sessions and support for those folks participating in that. And then also just the ability to support whatever other kind of technical or research needs are required for them to put together their planning document. And then in phase 2, again, the funding is $600,000 over 2 years. So at the moment, we don't have a prescription of what is and is not allowable in the grand scheme of those demonstrations, because the hope is that those demonstrations can support whatever it is needed to succeed. But obviously within the scope and scale of about $300,000 a year, you're probably not going to do a major capital project. That being said, if a demonstration, is proposing a demand response vehicle and the choice is to augment the price of an existing one or rent one or, somehow get one from a participating partner and their associated costs. Those are the things that would probably be coverable by a demonstration. All of that is sort of going to pending our final review with those demonstration partners with the FTA, and there may need to be some flexibility on both parts. But yeah, you can kind of safely assume it's not a full capital project. It's intended to be the demonstration of the research of the problem the groups identify, how to address that.
The next 2 questions are about eligibility. So the first one is, are tribal communities eligible?
Yep, tribal communities are. If you go to the website, it's not, well, I can navigate to it now. Actually, I can just show everybody. The eligibility, again, is for outside of major urban areas of fewer than 50,000 people. There are two things that we are asking people to confirm for eligibility. Apologize for my scrolling here. Hopefully I'm not making anybody dizzy. But there is a map from the US DOT and FTA, which I will open here and we'll show you just a quick snippet of. This actually shows the definition of communities that are smaller than 50,000 people, urban areas that are smaller than 50,000 people. So I will just zoom into Minneapolis where I am because I know these examples all exist. So the Minneapolis, St. Paul, Twin Cities urban area is bigger than those two cities. It is bigger than that county. So it also includes some jurisdictions that are fewer than 50,000 people, but those jurisdictions fall inside this dark blue. If you are one of those jurisdictions that falls inside of a larger urban area, this project is not, you cannot be the focus of the project. I'll explain that more in a second. Similarly, if you see up here this light green, this is St. Cloud, still a community, a jurisdiction of more than 50,000 people and a slightly larger urban area. So what we're trying to do with this distinction is if your community, if your jurisdiction is inside either the light green or the dark blue, one of those urban areas that has more than 50,000 people, this is primarily focused on rural and small communities, tribal communities, not like the suburban and exurban parts of the urban areas. They were all eligible in the first round. So there's a large list of other eligible entities on the website, but this is the first tranche that we'll be reviewing to make sure that someone's eligible. And then there is also a large spreadsheet, and we are defining sort of what's eligible or not based on these urban areas as well. So again, these are ineligible jurisdictions and urban areas. So if you fall in one of these major urban areas, your community is ineligible. But those two, this is a list version of it. The visual version shows both. And if you have questions, please reach out to our team and we can help answer them.
So Kyle, you did mention as well that there was a Google form for interest, and someone's asking me to put that in the chat pod. So if you wouldn't mind sending that along, I'll add that. I did add the subscribe link as well as the website, and then we'll throw that Google form in there too.
Yep, perfect. Yep, it's called our expression of interest, and it is also right at the top of that webpage, and you should be able to check it out now once Jamie shares that.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Uh-huh.
The next question we have for you is, you mentioned that it needs to be rural, and you just went through how to calculate that using the map and the numbers, but are there any other geographical restrictions?
It can be anywhere within the United States and its territories. There are, as long as you are primarily serving one of those eligible jurisdictions, you can be connecting to larger communities, if that makes sense. So the example that I often use is where I started the webinar. If your proposal team is rooted in a community of fewer than 50,000 people, and the healthcare that everyone there needs access to is in a larger urban area, you are eligible to apply with that as a part of your problem statement, right? Like that we're trying to connect people to this urban area. It just has to be that the service provision and the planning effort that we're talking about is really focused in that smaller community, not in the urban area. So it can't be, the city of Minneapolis applies to say, hey, we're going to work with our transit agency to go out to a couple of smaller communities and bring them back to Minneapolis. That arrangement doesn't work. It could be the small community saying, we really need this transportation to Minneapolis. We are outside of the urban area. Here's our plan. And we are working with the city of Minneapolis on our team. I know that's kind of splitting hairs, but that's where we have landed on it.
Okay, and just one more time, I want to reiterate too that you're using Minnesota and Minneapolis as an example.
Examples,
yeah. Available for all of the U.S. because there are a few questions now asking if it's only available to Minneapolis.
Yep. No, sorry, I should do better at giving other examples. I just know I won't mess up naming cities if I was close to home. It is a completely national one. The 8 members of the phase 1 or the round 1 cohort are across the country from Hawaii to South Carolina, Maine to Illinois, California, Texas, Ohio, and I'm probably blanking on one. I don't know if I named 8.
We have quite a few more questions, so I'm going to keep going with some of those. The next question for you is, what are you assessing or evaluating when making the 3 project selections?
Yeah, there's a whole tab on the page that I would suggest folks look at in round 2 and can explore in further detail. That really shows what we're going to look through. I'll just highlight a couple things. In the RFP, we lay out a very wide range of certain populations that we think that we know based on research and experience are often facing transportation insecurity. So one element, for example, is who are you looking to help address the transportation insecurity problem? You know, is it families with children? Is it older residents? Is it folks with health needs? Really just trying to understand, trying to get a picture that you all who are applying have a clear vision for who you're trying to help. That's one example. It also includes things, as I mentioned, some team elements, like one of the requirements as you dig into the program and look at the eligibility is that the structure of these teams are sometimes is a little bit different from other programs. One of the things we really want to encourage is the participation of nonprofit and community-based organizations on the team. We do know that this might look different in rural and tribal communities, so are willing to talk with folks and learn what fits or not. But some of the evaluation is, do you have the right team structure? And that includes 40% of the planning budget going to a nonprofit or community-based organization. And then finally, just sort of the fit with the program itself is another example. Like, are you proposing a giant construction project? Then we will probably give you that feedback that that's not the right program. Is it something that we think will meaningfully address transportation insecurity? Or is it, just a proposal that, expands a needed but not very targeted service, for example? So there's a few things there, and it goes into much greater depth on the website. And again, at the webinars or in the future office hours, if folks have questions, I can delve into that more.
The next 2 questions are about the funding itself. So they're wondering if recent changes in federal agency consolidation might impact this FTA funding, and then whether or not this funding is available or if it was part of the paused funding.
Yep. So as of now, both all of our programming is continuing. Obviously, I don't know what additional guidance we'll get in the future, but as of right now, we're full steam ahead and have not heard otherwise. It would be good to sign up for that Maddie mailing list. That is certainly the place that we would communicate were there to be changes. But at the moment, we're really excited about the work that's ongoing. We're really excited about it being a national in scope project. And are anticipating continuing to work on that until heard otherwise. And yeah, I think that answers the second question too. So at the moment, nothing has been communicated to us that this program would not be continuing or would not be continued to be funded as planned.
You mentioned that there are these office hours that you're holding for technical assistance. Is there additional technical assistance provided as well?
Yeah, so if you're selected to participate in the round 1, if you're one of the 3 applicant sites that apply there, you have I think it's approximately 100 hours or so of support from our colleagues at the Center for Neighborhood Technology and Tool Design. Each site will be assigned a technical assistance lead from those 2 organizations. And they will be there to support the organizations who are doing their planning document and building towards the demonstration. Importantly, the key distinction here is that that support is not there to help you do the final development of your project. They're not doing the work for you. They are there to help you articulate the challenge, think through data needs, think about how you're talking about your demonstration, sharing learnings from other national examples and international examples. But that team is not going to be deployed to like write your proposal, for example. But every group that moves into phase 1 will have access to that technical assistance. There is not additional technical assistance at this RFP stage. It's just the information sessions that are available now.
The next question is about the time frame for funding, and I think you may have had that in the you showed a timeline. I'm not sure if you want to share that again.
Sure.
Thank you.
Give me 1 second. Is there a specific question about it, or is it just the broadest?
Just the broadest time frame for funding.
Yeah. Yep. 1 second. I sillily closed the wrong window, so I'm gonna share a different window real quick. And I'll just show this one more time. So here's the broad program timeline again. Everyone seeing that, correct?
Yes.
Okay, great. So phase one, again, we'll select in spring. As soon as you're contracted in that spring 2025 into summer 2025, the cohort members will have that approximate $100,000 to spend over the next 12 months. Then if you're selected into phase two, which again would happen in summer of 2026, we would augment, update the contract and add additional $600,000 there to do the actual demonstration. That funding is available then for 2 years from summer 2026 until summer of 2028. So there's $100K if you're selected into phase one that is used over a year, $600K into phase two used over 2 years. And importantly, again, that initial $100K, the technical assistance I talked about, that is not taken out of the community's $100K. That work from Tool or the Center for Neighborhood Technology is already a part of the program budget. It's not a part of the community's budget.
And this is a good time to ask another question that came in as well when you're looking at these phases. Someone would like to know if they already have a project ready to submit, would they just submit for phase two only?
That's a good question. So we really are not likely to fund somebody who says, I already know exactly what demonstration I'm going to do. I am just looking for funding for that demonstration. This is a two-step. There isn't skipping phase one. You have to participate in phase one in order to be eligible for phase two. And an important part of phase one is that we want you to really have the resources to go through a deep community engagement and listening process, and develop a demonstration plan that really targets the mobility, transportation, and security that you're challenge that you're identifying. And to do that, we're really mostly looking for new projects and new efforts. It can build from or branch from existing ideas, but given that the first year is really a planning process, I would encourage you to think about that being something that, if you already have a fully baked idea and it's just looking for funding, that's probably not going to rise to the top of our review process, because part of what our effort is to really support communities in working together and working amongst partners to build a intervention.
The next two, again, are a little bit more on eligibility of the project itself. So the first one is, would rural bike trails between multiple rural assets and communities be eligible for this program?
You could certainly make a case for that, for sure. There is no modal focus area or limitation. So what I mean by that is bikes are eligible, transit is eligible. We even have talked about, like private automobiles, if that's the solution that a community needs, car sharing or having some sort of driver program. These are FTA dollars, but the goal here is to really explore what are the solutions, not how do we make solutions fit a particular mode or for particular service. So yes, connective efforts, things that are connecting multiple communities and partners on the same proposal are totally opportunities you can throw out there and talk more about. And again, you're not going to be removed from consideration based on the type of intervention you're working towards.
And your answer actually answered the next question as well. So we'll just move on to another. We have just a few left for you. This next one is whether or not the language in the NOFO has changed. Their example is that the RAISE grant was last minute switched back to the BUILD grant.
We have updated our RFP to reflect pieces of of round two, but those content changes are primarily just focused on the rural and small community language. There were a few other smaller tweaks and clarifications based on some of the lessons learned from our first RFP, which was released about a year ago. But no significant changes. The program is still named the same program. So nothing else major on that front.
Okay, and our last question for you is this a reimbursable grant where the community pays first and is later reimbursed?
Yes, so this is a cost reimbursable grant. The way that our structure will work is that all of the community partner, each of the communities enters into a subcontract with the University of Minnesota. The communities invoice the University of Minnesota when they have incurred costs, whether that be labor or community support or other pieces, and then the University of Minnesota reimburses the community for those costs. And that's how the second round will work as well.
Okay, and we did have one more question sneak in here. How many applications are normally submitted versus how many are selected?
Sure. So I only have the previous round as an example, but I believe we initially had somewhere around 40 or 45 entities, partnerships, submit an expression of interest. It might have been actually a little bit more than that on the expression of interest side. I believe we ultimately had somewhere in the high 30s of applicants who submitted a full proposal. And then in the first round, we were able to select 8 to participate in phase 1. In the second round, because of just our funding availability from FTA, I can't tell you how many applicants I expect. I hope it's around the same number or same amount of interest. But in this case, it'll be slightly more competitive if there are that number, because we're only able to fund 3 phase 1 participants.
Perfect. Well, thank you one more time, Kyle, for joining us. We really appreciate you taking the time to explain about this funding source. I know a lot of our audience has never heard of it before, and there was obviously a great amount of questions and dialogue. So thank you for taking the time to answer all of those as well.
Yeah, absolutely, Jamie. Thank you. And thanks all for the questions. And please feel free to engage with us more. I want to make sure everybody's questions are answered. And again, the process is open for quite a while here, and there are lots of potential touch points. So looking forward to hearing from folks.
And Kyle, before, I know you do have to leave us early to get to your next webinar, but if you'll just send that Google form link to me, I'll make sure it makes it into the chat pod for the person who is asking for that as well.
Yep, I think I dropped it in the chat. Do you see it in there?
Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah.
All
Thanks,
right.
everyone. Have a good rest of your day.
Thank you, you too. Our next speaker is going to be Rebecca Delphia, a senior advisor with AARP's Livable Communities Initiative, partners with local leaders, policymakers, and citizen activists nationwide to make communities more livable for people of all ages. She leads the AARP Community Challenge Grant Program, which annually delivers millions of dollars to quick action projects across the U.S. She joined AARP Livable Communities after serving as an Associate State Director for Community Outreach with AARP Pennsylvania. Prior to working for AARP, Rebecca held an appointment as the first ever Chief Service Officer in Pittsburgh Mayor's Office. Rebecca holds a bachelor's degree and master's of social work degree from New York University. She and her family are proud to call Pittsburgh their home, and I'm very excited to turn our webinar over now to Rebecca.
Well, hi, everyone. Thanks for having me on for today's webinar. I'm glad to be here with you and to get to talk a little bit about the 2025 AARP Community Challenge and specifically how it supports communities nationwide. And I'll say this is a timely topic for us. We are now about halfway through our 2025 application window. So very much hope that today's conversation may be helpful in thinking about how this funding source could help to advance your work. And also, if you know of others that may be interested, if you could help us to spread the word. So probably I'm going to venture to guess many of you may have heard of AARP. You may or may not have heard of our Livable Communities work, but we work with communities all around the country to make improvements so that residents of all ages, but particularly those that are 50 plus, can live in places that meet their needs. We're currently working in around 1,500 communities that are utilizing their resources to date, and our work is really driven by our understanding that demographics are changing. By 2034, the U.S. will be comprised more of people over the age of 65 than under the age of 18 for the first time in our nation's history. And so a lot of what we do is help state and local leaders to look at their built environment, their housing, their transportation, their public spaces, their social engagement, and make sure they're designing communities that work for people of all different ages. Our vision is for a future in which U.S. communities are great places, again, for people of all ages and all abilities. So the Community Challenge is our flagship grant program. We've been offering this for 9 years now. And if you have not heard of it before, it's a grant program that's meant to make communities more livable for people of all ages with tangible improvements that can jumpstart long-term change. So as I said, it's the 9th year now, and the whole purpose is to help communities demonstrate those real, tangible changes to their public spaces, their housing, their transportation, through quick action projects. So the grants can often be used to demonstrate the benefits of thinking differently about a challenge in the community, taking an innovative approach, all with the goal of leading towards more permanent and long-term types of change. So I'll go through a lot of examples in the presentation, but think about things like temporary bike lanes, traffic calming measures, public space enhancements like benches and lighting. All of those are in the rubric of what we try to fund through this program. We've been able to achieve quite a good deal of scale over our first 8 years. From 2017 to 2024, we've invested $20.1 million through over 1,700 grants across 1,000 communities, directly benefiting about 12 million people who are age 50 plus. And the program is really meant to support communities of all different sizes, all different types. We generally find that about 4 in 10 of our grants go to urban communities, about 4 in 10 go to rural communities, 2 out of 10 go to suburban communities. That's not a predetermined funding formula, but that's just sort of based on some averages with our past grant distribution. And we've had places as small as a few hundred residents receive grants, so really meant to benefit communities again of all different sizes. We also accept applications from both nonprofit agencies that are recognized by the IRS and also government entities. And historically, we've seen about 2/3 of our grants go to those nonprofits, about 1/3 to government entities. So as I mentioned, about 40% of our Community Challenge grants have been delivered to rural communities since 2017, for about a total investment of around $7.2 million across about 670 grants. And we find that rural communities really do tend to punch above their weights in certain areas, and the grants can be used to lead to really positive results, from attracting additional support. We know that projects in rural communities can generate additional investments and support, and we've actually seen past projects lead to the grantees doubling their initial investment and additional funding from other public and private partners. They can be used to generate momentum, helping the grantee to attract visibility and attention and recruit new partners and volunteers to their efforts. And they can also fill small-scale capital needs. So that could be really helpful, thinking about how they can fill some of the gaps in permanent infrastructure and help communities improve their gathering places. So we think of our dollars as small dollars, but big impact. This gives you a sense of where our grant ranges have historically fallen, and a little bit of a range here, but since 2017, we do find that funded projects have an average grant amount of around $10,000 to $12,000, with about 92% of our grants being $20,000 or less. And in 2025, we are capping that at $25,000. But I'll go through again some examples, and you can see some of the really positive ways these kind of small dollars have been used to in turn make a pretty big impact and also bring additional funds into the pool for the projects that they're working on. Our focus is on tangible installations, community engagement, quick action projects, all meant to help grantees fast track ideas and replicate promising practices. As I mentioned, we've funded 1,700 grantees since 2017, and collectively they've been able to install more than 40,000 permanent and temporary improvements and create more than 6,000 resources, activities, and programs. So this includes, as you can see on the screen, over 300 murals and around 300 public art pieces, over 3,000 benches and seating, over 380 crosswalk improvements, engaging over 32,000 volunteers, and a whole lot more. In addition to those very tangible improvements that were on the prior slide, our research shows that the grants can help the grantee to attract additional funding, to overcome barriers in their community, and also to generate positive community awareness. And we found that about 49% of our grants help the grantee to garner additional funds from those public and private funding sources. They've been able to attract an additional $19 million to date. We found that 84% of the grants help the grantee advance change and overcome policy barriers, and about 100% help the grantee to gain that greater awareness, engagement, and new partners with their effort. All of our work is premised around this idea of a quick action timeline. So we know great communities take a long time to build, but we firmly believe that those kind of quick actions can spark longer term change. So the whole program is basically meant to take place within a calendar year from project conception to completion. So you can take a look at the screen here. Right now, we're about halfway through that 8-week application window. Applications will be due at 5 p.m. Eastern Time on Wednesday, March 5th. We'll then go through a judging process, and applicants will be notified of their status by May, which then kicks off about 8 weeks of paperwork where we're generating vendor forms and MOUs and looking for those completed mid-June. Public announcement will take place in late June, which is when the projects can begin. And then all the projects have about 5 months, again, to see them through to completion. So all projects are completed by December 15th, and a deadline for after action reports is at the end of the year. Here are the grant opportunities that we have available for 2025. We're accepting applications across 3 different grant opportunities. Our flagship grants, which are really kind of a wide open space to apply in a few different categories with a lot of creativity. Capacity building micro grants, which are smaller grants that are paired up with additional resources in some targeted areas. And then demonstration grants, which we think of as our replication station, or really where we're looking to replicate promising practices, successful past projects. These are the flagship grant opportunities this year. Again, these are our traditional grants that we've been offering since 2017 that have a really broad, open ability for communities to apply for funding and be creative. The categories are public places, transportation, housing, digital connections, and community resilience. And these have been anywhere from a few $100s for small activities that are pretty short term to tens of thousands of dollars for larger projects. And as I mentioned, in 2025, the grants will not exceed $25,000. Here's a couple examples of these. And again, this is a space where there's a lot of room to be creative. So this is not meant to limit your thinking, but instead to give you a couple examples of some of the ways those funds have been used. This is a project from Homage Senior Services in Linwood, Washington, where they provided fare-free rides to older adults, looking to make transit more accessible and affordable and demonstrating the benefits of a rural transit route in an underserved community. And we have here someone who says, the free fares gave me the chance not only to go to my doctor, but also to visit family and friends. I would ride the bus more often if the fares were free. So this is an example of the sort of projects we've been able to fund successfully in this category. And here's another one. This one's from the city of Madison, Georgia. This was a project where they were improving the local sidewalk network, making repairs, adding pedestrian signals and crosswalks for greater safety, and also creating a small park with some benches, a pavilion, some landscaping, and the like. And someone said, who knew there were little pockets of green so close to the downtown? I had no idea until I took a walkabout instead of a drive-by. So those are a couple examples of our flagship projects. Here's the next grant opportunity. This is capacity building micro grants. These are $2,500 grants that then we pair up with additional resources like webinars, cohort learning, coaching, and some publications that we have available. And there's 4 different types of these. Disaster preparedness training, which is a new category we have on offer this year. Walk audits, which are all about looking at doing street safety assessments and looking at how people can get around by foot. Bike audits, same idea, street safety assessments looking at bikeability, and then home fit guide modifications looking at how to make a home really a lifelong place for someone to age and thrive. And each of these come with expert assistance by some of our nonprofit partners, so groups like SBP, America Walks, League of American Bicyclists, and R.L. Mace Universal Design Institute that are providing some of those direct learning opportunities, again, webinars, coaching, and the like to the grantees that are part of these cohorts. And here's a couple examples. Again, this is from a walk audit that we funded in Orosi, California with the Rural Communities Resource Center, where they were conducting 6 different walk audits around 2 busy traffic corridors, and then held some community meetings to discuss how to use that data to increase street safety. And someone said, after walking around our town, seeing all the improvements that need to be done, our oldest participant said she felt happy that she could join with others who wanted to make Orosi better and safer for everyone who lives here. And this is another walk audit. This is from the city of Auburn in Maine. And they were doing some walk audits along two different Maine DOT funded traffic and pedestrian safety modification projects, and one that was in the planning phase. And they wanted to do some traffic calming to make it safer for pedestrians. And here they had a 50-plus participant who was legally blind, attended the walk audit with her service dog. And the perspective that was gained was helpful to other participants who were able to then see how to make improvements to the streetscape. So a couple examples of some of the projects in that area. The final grant opportunity we have are our demonstration grants. These are grants that are, again, it's our replication station. We're trying to replicate promising local efforts, typically things we funded in the past and seen a lot of success for. These grants tend to be $10,000 to $20,000. They will not exceed $25,000. And again, 4 different types of these, 2 of which are new this year. The first is enhancing pedestrian safety, which is with funding support from Toyota Motor North America, who's been a longtime supporter of the program. We also have a new category on expanding high-speed internet access and adoption with funding from Microsoft. We have a category on reconnecting communities that have been divided by infrastructure, such as highways. And then finally, a category on implementing housing design competitions that can help to increase and encourage policies for greater housing choice. And I'm going to give you a couple examples of these as well. This is one from Toledo, Iowa, from the Tama-Alito Toledo Healthy Hometown Committee. They were installing 2 different crosswalks to connect the 2 different communities and putting in some flashing yield signs and connecting sidewalks to link the crosswalks to other walkways. And again, you can see here, someone said there were 2 active seniors who used to drive to their aerobics class and now are riding their bicycles using the rectangular rapid flashing beacons to cross safely. So really nice story of some of the ways it makes people's lives better in the community. And here's another. This was a pop-up project that was funded in the town of Shelburne, Vermont, that was funded by Toyota this past year through the program and was all about testing different strategies to slow traffic and improve the pedestrian and bike safety along their main street. So they put in some bike parking and crosswalks, street art, and some other traffic calming measures to help residents to really get to picture and envision what those permanent improvements would look like. And again, a quote from a property owner who lived nearby, whose house was close by, commenting on how much nicer and quieter the street was as a result of the slower moving traffic. So hopefully this has sparked something for you, maybe generated some ideas. If you're curious who's eligible, it's pretty simple. It's nonprofit agencies that are recognized by the IRS, 501c3s, C4s, C6s. It's also government entities, and we can accept others on a case-by-case basis, typically with a fiscal sponsorship or something of the like. We cannot fund individuals or to for-profit entities. And again, different types of projects, typically looking at permanent physical improvements, temporary demonstrations that can lead to that long-term change, or new and innovative programming and services. We don't typically fund a lot of ongoing programming. There are other threshold criteria and other eligibility. So for example, certain activities won't be eligible for funding. And rather than bore you with that whole list now, I'll just refer folks to go over to our website and check those out, because that's pretty clear. Here's the scoring criteria. Every project, every application that's submitted is scored against these criteria. 4 different areas we're looking at, typically impact for 45 points, really looking at, does the project address a clear need to bring about positive change and demonstrate the ability to overcome barriers? Execution for 30 points, looking at whether the applicant is able to deliver the project on time, on budget, engaging all the right stakeholders. Addressing disparities, looking at whether the project addresses disparities for people of color and other historically marginalized groups. And then finally, innovation for 10 points, looking at creative and unique design elements. And across all these, we do want to see special attention given to projects that benefit people age 50 and older. It doesn't mean they have to be the sole beneficiaries of the project, but certainly there should be that incorporation into the thinking. Here's how to apply. You apply through our website. That's aarp.org/community challenge. Again, the deadline for that is Wednesday, March 5th, 5 p.m. Eastern time. All the applications do need to go through our website. We're not able to accept any over email or mail. And then finally, again, if you're interested in checking out some other examples, maybe you're curious what projects have been funded in my state or near my community or in other communities that are of a certain size or projects on a specific area, this is really the best place to go. It's our livable map, aarp.org/livable map. And it's an interactive tool. You can search on any host of criteria, lots of filters, but you can find photos of these projects, videos, news articles, websites. You can find out what happened as a result of the projects. And again, use some of those search features in order to find similar projects and projects that are nearby. So with that, I'm going to show a very short video, and then we'll go to Q&A. This is a project that we funded in Raleigh, North Carolina, which I recognize is not a rural community, although we have funded very similar projects in rural communities. And this was where this was a bike audit project. The city was looking at putting in some bike lanes, and they wanted to assess the safety and accessibility using the bike audit assessment tool. And this was all done by volunteers. So I'm going to pass it back to my colleague who's going to help us run the video, and then I'll be with you for Q&A.
My name is Jared Harbor. Our organization is called Oaks and Spokes. We're standing right now in John Chavis Memorial Park. It is an historic park located in just southeast of downtown Raleigh that sits along Martin Luther King Jr. Boulevard, and it serves as a community center, a recreational center to the kind of southeast Raleigh area. The road that the park is located on is a pretty busy road that runs along just south of downtown, goes through a lot of neighborhoods, is kind of the main access point to a lot of neighborhoods in southeast Raleigh. We wanted to pick this area because there's people walking here, there's people riding their bike here. The road, Martin Luther King Jr. Boulevard right behind us, makes it very challenging to access the park. So yeah, we're looking at this intersection right here at Garner Road, as well as parts of Garner Road heading downhill, which is heading south to a greenway access. Bike audit is a great way to kind of assess the safety and the accessibility of a particular area. That can be an intersection, it could be a neighborhood, an entire neighborhood, it could just be a quarter-mile corridor of road that has a lot of people using that might not have great facilities to bike or walk.
The audits themselves are very helpful with us making sure that all ages and abilities have the ability to get to the communities the way that they choose to get to them, or the ways in which they're able to. Walking and biking in communities is a more accessible way for people to get to the locations that they'd like to, and so this ultimately leads to us being able to help our community move the way that they need to. The AARP Community Challenge Grant has given us the ability to do all these different community outreach and engagement opportunities with our local participants that volunteer, or people that are just interested in making the general areas where they live, work, or play better enhancements, and being able to teach them how they can collect this information has been pivotal to us.
Thank you, AARP Community Challenge, for funding today's audit and the 7 other biking audits that we've conducted this year, and for being advocates at a national level to create better bikeable and walkable communities.
Thanks. So that's it in terms of presentation, and I'm happy to go to Q&A now.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And we do have some questions that have come in for you already, but if we have others, please do put those in the Q&A pod now so that we can make sure we can answer all of your questions. The very first one that we got for you, Rebecca, is, will this fund community engagement for planning for a capital or construction project to build walk and pedestrian and safety infrastructure?
Yes. So we will, we absolutely do fund community engagement. It's one of the things that we love to fund. So I think the funding can be used really effectively to think about ways to engage the community, for example, on intended infrastructure, to get feedback from the community. I think a lot of the pop-up tactical urbanism projects that we've been able to fund so effectively are very much in that vein, allowing communities to test out a certain sort of intervention before finalizing plans or being able to putting it in place. So I would say yes, community engagement is absolutely a very core part of what we try to fund through the program, and we're absolutely able to do that. I'll say we typically do not fund things like research or studies per se, but things that engage the community around intended improvements are absolutely eligible.
It does look like we had a few people who were unable to either hear or see the video or didn't play quite well due to buffering. And so we do have the link for that. And when we're done with answering these Q&As, I will drop that into the chat pod for anyone who'd like to go back and watch that again. And then there's some mentioning about presentations too. So again, just one more time, if you need a copy of the presentation or haven't been able to follow along, if you go to the top right-hand corner of your screen, there's a piece of paper with a paper clip, and that's where you can download all of today's presentations. And that way you'll have a copy of them as well. So another question for you, Rebecca, is do schools in rural areas qualify to apply for these projects?
Absolutely. We've definitely funded schools before. We've done some really cool kind of walking school bus programs in certain communities. But again, anything that has that either nonprofit designation or government entity, which typically includes a school, would be eligible to apply.
And then another question says, I really hate asking this question, but does addressing disparities still apply with the changes being made?
Yes, that remains a part of our scoring criteria.
And another question that came in is what kind of proposed projects will or have been denied?
That's a great question. So I'll say typically last year we received over 3,000 applications for the program. So, and we funded about 343 of them. So our fund rate was around 10%. And so I think the bottom line is there are lots of really fabulous projects that ultimately are not able to get funded in a given year. So it doesn't mean that, I wouldn't say that every project that we want to fund, we're able to fund just due to budgets and how far we're able to stretch them. But I would say certain things that typically are less of a fit would be, again, making sure the projects have some sort of benefit to people age 50 plus, not solely benefiting them necessarily. We believe in communities for all ages, but do have some level of focus. Projects should be aligned with our project categories, obviously. They need to be eligible for our eligibility guidelines. And one of the stumbling blocks we'll see is sometimes around ongoing programming. We sometimes get applications for, want to continue operations for, whereas we're really looking to fund more pilot kind of effort, something new, something innovative, particularly something that helps the community to build the case for something. And so I think our funding could probably best be utilized for that. So something, for example, where you're trying something new, maybe you're collecting data that then allow you to leverage that into something down the road, that would be a really good fit for our program.
Right, and it looks like we don't have any more questions. I'm going to ask one more time if there's anything else for the Q&A, if you wouldn't mind putting that in there, and we'll have Rebecca answer those for you. All right, well, thank you so much, Rebecca. We really appreciate you joining us today. And I think you'll be able to stay around with us for a little while. So if we have questions come up again, we can ask those after we go through the next few slides, if that's okay.
Yeah, great. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course. Thank you for being here. All right, let me just pull up PowerPoint again, and we will get going on our very last couple of slides here. Okay, and Dana, are you able to see the PowerPoint in full screen?
No, it's not full.
Interesting. I don't know why that keeps happening. Okay, let's try this way. Better?
There you go. Perfect.
Okay. Awesome. So the other program that we were asked to talk about, or we were planning to talk about today, was the Rural and Tribal Technical Assistance Program. Unfortunately, our presenter was unable to make it to today's webinar at the last minute. And so I am just going to provide some very basic information for everyone. I will not be able to answer any questions about this program, but we can point you to the contact if that is something that, that you would like. So the Rural and Tribal Technical Assistance Program currently has a NOFO out, a Notice of Funding Opportunity out. And here on your screen, you'll see the program webpage as well as the grants.gov Notice of Funding Opportunity. And I'll drop both of these into the chat pod right after I finish this discussion as well. Currently, this sits as a $27 million no match grant and is on a first come, first serve basis. So this particular assistance program, why we wanted to bring it to your attention today, in case you were unaware of it, is because it's not actually funding implementation, but rather it's for the funding for planning and designing phase activities, which would include things like hiring of staff or procurement of expert firms to provide financial, technical, and legal assistance with the project-related planning and design phases. So the piece here is to help applicants develop transportation infrastructure projects in rural and tribal communities that will qualify for federal funding and financing programs for additional development phase activities and construction in the future. The notice of funding opportunity right now is set so that the applications are to open on March 4th at 2 p.m. and will close on April 3rd at 4:59 p.m. Eastern Time. And currently on the webpage, they have that notice of funding opportunity out along with the application questions on the website. And this is so that you would be able to review all this information and draft responses in advance. This particular program, when it opens on March 4th, in the past, what's happened is that it has filled up very quickly because it is first come, first serve. So that's why they provide everything ahead of time in case you'd like to prepare to be ready to submit when it does open. They have both single project and multi-community project questions available on the website to take a look at. And they did record a webinar on January 14th, which is available on the program webpage as well. So I would recommend that you take a look at that webinar for additional information on this program. There's also on the webpage more information about whether or not a project is eligible. So going through that same type of thing that Kyle went through on what is eligible or not eligible and considered rural for this particular program. As we know, each program is a little bit different as to how they define and quantify rural. So there's some more information on the website. So again, I apologize that our presenter was unable to be here, and I will drop these two links in. If there are any changes to those dates and when this may open, or if it will open, all of that information would be updated on the Notice of Funding Opportunity listing on grants.gov. So I'll drop those into the chat pod for you. One other place that I wanted to also just make sure that you're aware of is the Rural Opportunities to Use Transportation for Economic Success, or ROUTES initiative. And I'll drop these two links in the chat pod as well. This ROUTES website provides a lot of different information for rural agencies to take a look at. And one of the great things on here is the DOT Discretionary Grants Dashboard. And this is a way to go ahead and search for particular grants that are available through the US DOT that you may be eligible for. And again, it does go through all those definitions of rural for each of these, lets you know if notice of funding availability is out right now, and also would provide additional information if things have been changed or paused as we've come into the 2025 year. So these are some great links to just have in your back pocket and take a look at for funding that may be available. And with that, I'm going to take a look at our Q&A one more time and just see if we have any more questions that may have come in on AARP. And I think For this particular rural and tribal technical assistance program, again, we had a few questions about the presentation. That the link is going to be available. I'll drop that right now into our chat pod for everybody, so that you'll have that. There is a webinar where she did present and provide information, and that would be a great place to go take a look for additional information on her program. If we are able to reschedule her, then we will definitely try to do that for everybody, and we can send out a message about that. So I just put the program webpage as well as the notice of funding opportunity listing available. And I'm going to drop the routes initiative and the discretionary grants dashboard as well in there for you all. All right. So thank you all very much for joining us today. Again, I do apologize that our last presenter was unable to make it. I do want to thank Kyle and Rebecca very much for taking the time out to provide information about these funding sources that many people did not know that they were available. So I'm really excited that they were able to come on today and talk about these. I hope that they'll be useful for you and that you can take a look more at these 3 funding sources and pass along information to anyone that may that you know that may be able to go ahead and use these. So thank you all for joining us today. We really appreciate your time. Have a great afternoon.